little bit different tonight. We're having shop talk for the men. So if you're a guy at Common Room, why don't you stick around for a great message and an online video discussion. Women, we haven't forgot about you. Renew is this Thursday, and it's not too late to register. Things are looking a little bit different, but we'll be back to normal next Tuesday. But all the guys, let's have a great night.
Well, hello, men. I am really excited to welcome you all to tonight's Shop Talk. My name is Dominic, and I lead the men's ministry here for Faithbridge Church. Now, whether you're a man of Faithbridge or visiting us tonight, there is one thing that we all have in common. We are engaged in a fight. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul was awaiting his execution, and he spoke these words to his spiritual son, Timothy. Starting in verse 6, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." When we reach our last days, don't we all want this to be true about ourselves? Well, that takes intentionality, guys. And tonight we have the privilege to hear from a brother who's going to give us some very practical insights from his own life that will encourage and challenge us on our journey. Our speaker, Marc Davis, is a combat medic veteran and has over 20 plus years in law enforcement. Now, when I first met Marc, he was walking through the atrium of our church doing a little reconnaissance for an active shooter training program that he would eventually take the whole staff through. Guys, he is really the real deal. And I want you not only to listen to him, but have a notepad ready because you're going to want to jot down some of the things that he has to share. After he speaks, I'll come back on and I'll transition us into our table discussion time where you'll have a chance with some other men to kind of talk through and hash out what you learned tonight. I'm also going to be unveiling something that I have for every man of Faithbridge, everybody watching this to engage with, something that can radically and positively impact every relationship you have. So make sure to stick around, guys. I'll see you soon, and here's Marc.
All right. Hey, how's everyone doing? I know you probably can't respond to me. This whole coronavirus thing has got us all talking to each other through computers and cell phones and all that crazy stuff. The millennials are loving it because that's how they communicate anyway. So we're going to do whatever it takes, all right? That's right. I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. My name is Marc Davis. I'm the director of risk and safety at New Hope Church, which is a little church just south of Houston. I've been on staff for 10 years. And let me tell you something about ministry. We are super blessed with an amazing lead teaching pastor at our church. Our founding pastor has a heart for Jesus, and it shows in the growth and the way he brings people together. And your church is the same. I just love the heart of Pastor Dylan and Pastor Weirland and just the work that they're doing, and to hear their stories and it is amazing to hear about their families and just their love for ministry and what they're doing. You guys are blessed, and that is rare. That is not normal at all. So if you're a member of Faithbridge Church, stay in there, get volunteering, get involved, get plugged in. If you're just visiting and you've never been to Faithbridge Church, then what I want to do is I want to encourage you to check it out. Check it out. Get with Dominic or Pastor Dylan or Pastor Weirland. They'd be glad to give you any information about the church, or go to their website. Okay, so all that aside, again, my name is Marc Davis. I'm the Director of Operations at New Hope Church. I've been on the team for 10 years. I have a past of law enforcement and a present law enforcement. The reason why I say that is because I still work part-time law enforcement. I started in law enforcement 25 years ago. Next week, and I was a young kid then, and I stepped out of full-time law enforcement to come serve the church. So today I'm here to talk about the good fight, staying in the fight. What does that mean? Well, for all intents and purposes for this group here, hopefully we're not going to be punching anyone or MMA wrestling, but if that's what you use to teach people about Jesus, and do it. But the fight is, to me, your family, your faith and your family. And today I'm going to cover 3 main points. The first point I'm going to cover is your story isn't done. Your story's not done. From the moment you're born till you go into the ground, till you die, your story is being written. Your testimony is being written. God's still using you. He uses you for every breath that you have. Number 2, keep your head in the game. You know, it's really common in sports to have a coach yell, keep your head in the game, keep your head in the game, or maybe even parents yell, keep your head in the game. What that means is you're in the game, maybe playing, maybe on the bench, but you're in the game, maybe you're on the field. However, mentally, you're not in the game. So just because you're there doesn't mean you're there. So keep your head in the game. Number 3, fatherhood matters. We're going to talk a little bit about fatherhood and what it means to me. I'm going to share a personal story of mine about fatherhood. You know, as fathers, it matters. Let me tell you, if you can hear me talking right now, you need to understand that 99.99999% of the problems in our world is because of men not standing up and being men, because of lack of fatherhood. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I know we probably have some fathers in here, maybe some future fathers in here, maybe even grandfathers. So your job matters. So number 3, fatherhood matters. So I'm from a small town in Kansas, and I was born and raised there, and so I'm kind of a hayseed, maybe a Yankee. We say that everyone from Iowa north is a Yankee, but I've been in Texas for over 20 years, got here as quick as I could, as most non-residents say, and I love this state. I just love everything about the country of Texas. It's like we're that bottom state that holds the other 49 up. And so I love Texas, love my state. So I'm from Kansas. I was born and raised there. Growing up through school, I was an athlete. As you can tell, I'm kind of big, and maybe the camera doesn't show it, but, well, I'm not that big. I'm 6'2", but my wingspan from arm to arm is actually 7'1". From fingertip to fingertip is supposed to be your height. Well, I'm a freak of nature because that's not my height. If my measurements were correct, I would be 7'1". So having said that, I played a lot of sports. I played basketball, played football, played track, loved it. Grew up going to games and watching sports and just fell in love with sports and just a passion of teamwork behind it. And so when I graduated from high school, I had an opportunity to go to college. I mean, it was really an honor, and it wasn't a big college. I had an opportunity to go to college to play football, and I had an opportunity to go to college to play basketball. I chose basketball. And so as soon as I graduated from high school, I packed my stuff up and I walked out of the house towards the college scene. Let me tell you, that's one of the most dangerous places a young man can be, is that transition between graduating from high school to go into college, because statistics show that a majority of men and women walk away from their faith the minute they graduate from high school. Once they leave the home, they walk away from their faith. That was me. I walked away from it. The faith was a little bit different. I was Catholic, born and raised Catholic, so I walked away from that. I knew the Lord, I knew Jesus, I knew the Bible, but you know, I wasn't forced to do it anymore, so to me, it wasn't important. So I left, I went to college, and of course, that first year of college, I flunked out. That's right, I flunked out. Just my head wasn't in the game. You know, I didn't want to go to school. I didn't want to do the sports. I didn't want to do what I was supposed to do. So I dropped out. I got a job working at a battery plant, actually working midnights, and I was on an assembly line, and I would take these 2 electrodes and car batteries would go by, and I would check each and every car battery as it went by. It was the most boring, monotonous job I did for 8 solid hours standing in one place checking batteries. So I had decided at that point that probably wasn't the job for me. That wasn't the career I wanted to do, and I didn't know what I was going to do. You see, I have 3 brothers, and my brothers kind of had some brushes with the law. They're godly men now. I love them to death, and they're doing some amazing things. But then I did not want to go in the path that they went. So what I decided to do is start a family and join the military. Actually, I did it backwards because I met a girl, I got her pregnant, I married her, then I joined the military, then I got to know her. So if you can imagine the kind of father and husband that I was didn't know her, I was new into the military, and I was still young, I was still trying to do crazy things, and I totally squandered my family life in the military. Now, the military didn't help. And I say that because, I spent, every year I'd spend over, 175 to 200 days away from the home. And so for 4 years, I was able to travel, see some awesome things, do some amazing stuff, carry and shoot some amazing weapons. And, but yet I wasn't home. I was absent. My head wasn't in the game. So as soon as I got out of the military, I had to have a job. When I got out, I didn't want to stay in. So the first thing I did is I saw a advertisement for law enforcement. And I was like, hey, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could check this out. So I went into law enforcement, and that was the beginning of what's brought me here today, my story. But it was also the beginning of some really bad places in my life. And I'll tell you why. So I went into law enforcement, and I was never home. As a police officer, I was working either side jobs, or I was working midnights or evening shifts. I was doing everything I could to earn money, but doing everything I could to stay away from home. I really got sour towards people. My mentality was, if your mouth is moving, you're lying. Think about that. The law enforcement mentality, my law enforcement mentality was, don't trust anyone. Everyone is not good. Or has not good in them. So you got to treat them like they're not good. And when you have a career in that, you bring that home and you bring that into your home. That means you treat your wife like she's a suspect. You treat your kids like they're suspects. And you become cold and you become distant and you become cynical at the world. And that's how I started my family. I was in law enforcement. I had a family. I thought I was doing it right. I'd go to work every day. I was on the right side of the law. But it just wasn't working out. So I continued, and let me tell you, totally drove my family in the ground in law enforcement. I probably drank more than I was supposed to drink, hung out with people that weren't the right people to hang out, let's just say that. They were doing bad things. They were doing things that were sinful and things that I was not supposed to be doing. And so eventually, my wife left me. And I tried to salvage my relationship, so, I went running to her, I'll change. I got her back, got the family back, and I continued to do the same things. And eventually, it left to her walking out for good. So I had 2 young children, and I was a father. And not only did my wife leave me, but she left the state. So she took my children, our children, and left the state. That was really hard for me. I struggled with it. For a long time. As a matter of fact, for a year, I would drive from where I lived 8 hours to where they were. There were times I would sleep in my car at the Walmart parking lot just so I could spend time with the kids and turn around and drive home and then go to work at my police job and then go do my side job. And that was just a cycle. Holidays, it was tough. It really was. But that was a position that I put myself in. If I could share one Bible verse about building a family or building anything, it would come out of the book of Matthew 7:24. And I'm going to read it out of my Bible. And this is called The Wise and the Foolish Builder. And it says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on a rock. The rain comes down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had a foundation on rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who builds his house on sand. The rain's going to come, the stream will rise, the wind will blow and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. And that's what I did, is I built a family, and I built a career that wasn't on a solid rock. It was on shifty sand. I had it figured out that I was going to do it myself. So all this time I was traveling and to visit my kids and then working, and I had a courtesy job at an apartment complex. And what that means, if you're in law enforcement and you're in this room, what a courtesy job is, basically, I live at the apartment, and I make sure that people aren't skinny dipping in the pool at night When I'm not at work, I'm patrolling the apartment complex. So I'm always working. If I'm not at work, I'm at work at home. And I did this so that I could get a discount on the apartment because it was all I could afford. I had a truck I couldn't afford. I had debt, crazy, unbelievable debt. Had about 7 girlfriends. That within itself is, that's emotional debt. I was just in a really bad place. So one day I had a really bad day at work, and I had decided that, you know what, this whole living thing wasn't for me. I thought that I was a pretty strong person. I'd never get to that point, but I got to that point. And so what I did was I went to a local hardware store, I bought a bunch of painter's plastic, and I went into my apartment, went into my room, I wrote 2 letters. One letter I put on the outside of the door, one letter I put on a little table outside the bedroom. The letter outside the door was to the management company saying, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I killed myself in here, I put plastic up, tried to not destroy the place as much as I could, sorry. And then the letter that I put outside the door was to my kids, and I'll share a little bit more about that. So I sat on my bed, I covered everything in plastic. I had taken 2 days off of work because I figured, if I was away from work, people wouldn't come looking for me, and I would be able to carry out my plan, if that makes any sense at all. It probably doesn't, but that's where my mind was. So I sat at the edge of my bed with everything covered in plastic. And when I sat there at the edge of the bed, I took this. This is a Glock 357 SIG, which means it's a 357 compensated. I pulled the trigger, I stuck it at the front of my teeth, and I put my thumb on the trigger, and I was prepared to pull the trigger. Let me just say this. Things that happen in a person's life to get them to that point, we can't judge from the outside. The only thing we can judge is say the foundation wasn't solid. And if you know anyone who's committed suicide, I'm not judging them at all. I'm just saying your foundation has to be solid. So I stuck my Glock in my mouth, and the phone rang. There was a phone on the nightstand, it rang. And so it kind of shocked me a little bit, not enough to pull the trigger, because I'm telling you, that was the heaviest trigger in the world to pull. I pull my trigger a lot. I fired my gun a lot, but that was the hardest trigger to pull back. So I reached over and I answered the phone, and it was a friend from work. And he said, hey, listen, I need you to do me a favor. And I said, well, I'm kind of busy right now. I got some stuff going on. He said, no, I know. I saw you took some days off of work, but I really need a favor. I need it bad. I said, hey, listen, bud, I'm busy. I have a lot of stuff going on. I'm not going to be able to do it for you. And he says, hey, listen, okay, I need this as like a really big favor. We got this little church in town that needs an officer to stand at the road and direct traffic. And if we don't fill that spot, then the county or the state or some constable or someone's going to come in and take that spot. And we don't want cops working side jobs in our city, right? And I was like, man, I'm telling you, I can't do it. I have a lot going on. He said, just do it Saturday night. It's Saturday and Sunday. If you can do it Saturday night, I'll find someone for Sunday. And this was a Friday. And I said, nah, I can't. I just can't. And then he pulled me in. He said, hey, okay, well, let me tell you this. Last year at Christmas time, you wanted to drive to Arkansas to see your kids. You remember that? And you needed someone to work half your shift for you so you could leave. And I worked that shift for you. So I'm just calling in a favor. I need you to do this for me. And so, then I had enough integrity to say, yeah, okay. I told him, I'll do it Saturday, but I can't do it Sunday. And he said, good, Saturday, this is where you need to be, this is where you need to go. So Saturday afternoon or early evening, I showed up and at this little church, and it was kind of about a quarter mile off the road, and I just stood out at the road and I stopped traffic so cars can come in and go and come from the parking lot. And so I was directing traffic, and one of the things I noticed is everyone leaving that church was happy. And it kind of pissed me off. They had joy. I mean, they would actually drive by and say, hey, God bless you, thanks for being here. Man, we appreciate you. Officer, thank you for your service. They were saying all these things I wasn't used to people saying to me, because you don't hear those things when you're on the job. And we don't live for those things, but hey, I mean, they're nice to hear. I thought people were horrible. These people coming from this building, something drew me in. So I worked and I directed traffic that evening, and right before the last service was going to end, I noticed a gentleman come walking up the road, and his name is George. He came walking out to the street, and he said, "Hey, I see you out here directing traffic, dodging cars. I appreciate it." And I didn't want to talk to him because I didn't want to talk to strangers, because I'm a cop and everyone's a stranger. Like I said, if your mouth is moving, you're lying. I don't want to listen to it. So I kind of ignored him, and he says, "Hey, we almost had someone hit coming out of this parking lot, and, Sundays are horrible. Do you think you could come back, and are you doing this Saturday and Sunday?" I said, "Nope, I'm just doing it Saturday." And he said, "Okay." He says, "Well, okay. Well, we got to find someone for Sunday. Do you know anyone?" I said, "No, I don't know anyone." He said, "This car pulled out and it had a family in it, and there was a drunk coming up this roadway." This roadway actually is called Drunk Highway. It is to today. It's where all the drunks take the back roads to get from the bars to home. He said, and they were almost T-boned, and, it would have been horrible. It would have killed that family if they would have hit him. Speed limit on that road at the time was 55 miles an hour. And so you're pulling out on a road, 2-lane roadway that's 55. So I thought, you know what? I'll come back Sunday. So I went home. I took my uniform off. I went to bed, took the plastic off my bed, didn't want to sleep on that. And I came back the next Sunday morning. And again, when I got there Sunday, people were so kind leaving that property. Let me say this. Kindness matters. You never know. I don't care how hardcore you are. If you're too hardcore to be kind to people, then you're a sissy. You're not strong. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say this too. I might even get a little emotional while I'm speaking up here. And if there's men in this room right now that think that crying's a sign of weakness, if there's men in this room that think I'm a sissy for crying, I got one thing to say. Jesus, he cried. He was the strongest man that we'll ever know, the strongest man I've ever met. If it's okay for him, it's okay for us. So anyway. So I went back, I was working, and then this George guy came walking out to me again and said, "Hey, I'm glad you came back. I thought you weren't going to be here." And I said, "Yeah, I wasn't going to come, but, you mentioned the family getting hit and everything, so I'm just doing it today, though. I can't do it after today. I got a lot going on. I got some big plans. I can't do it after today." And he was like, "Okay, yeah, I get that. I'm cool. So while he was talking to me, he said, "Hey, listen, I see you're smoking. We got a little smoking area outside of our church up here, just some benches with some speakers where we sit and smoke." And I was like, "What kind of snake and oil church is this? You got a smoking section outside your church?" And he said, "So in between, when service is going on, if you want, you can come up and, sit and chat or talk or whatever, if you're interested." And so I had first, of course, said, "No, I'm not interested." And he, again, was persistent, just as persistent as the officer was that called me and wanted me to work this side job. And so eventually I went down and I sat. And while I was sitting there, I was sitting on a bench with men who I felt like were the kind of men I'd hang out with. They weren't all fancy, suited up. Let me tell you this. Some of the meanest people I've ever met were Christians who go to church every single weekend. Some of the meanest people I ever met. These guys were so down to earth, and they were so easy to talk to. And we talked about hunting, we talked about guns, we talked about all this stuff. And I'm at church with this speaker behind me and some guy talking on it, and I'm talking to these guys about stuff that I didn't even think correlated or related to church. And so I went back out to direct traffic, and George came out again to me, and I'm telling you, this guy, he was on it. He was like a heat-seeking missile. And George came out and said, "Hey, while we were talking, I looked down, I noticed that the weapon you were carrying, it's a 357 SIG. It's compensated. It's called a 31C. And I'm an armorer. I actually build guns. I put them together, and I got my own little armory shop at the house. And I have some Glocks, and I bought a trigger assembly for one of those Glocks, and it's a 2-pound trigger, which is a trigger that you barely touch it and pull the trigger, it's going to fire." And he said, "I'm interested. I want to know if you maybe be interested in putting that in your gun, or do you have one?" I said, "No, I got the standard factory trigger, and I'm happy with that." He goes, "Come on, let me gift it to you." I said, "Man, I don't want to take something that belongs to you." And he said, "Listen, I love the cops, I love the police, and if I know that I'm giving you the edge, one edge while you're on the street, a better trigger, I'll sleep better at night." I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, because a lighter trigger would sure make my job easier. So I had decided that I was going to allow him to do that. I don't even know why I did that, because it was totally out of my comfort zone. That's just not something I did. And so after church, I followed him to his shop. He had this amazing armor shop where he had all kinds of ARs and had all kinds of other rifles and handguns. And man, he had everything that he was working on in his shop. And I watched him as he pulled the trigger assembly out of my gun and put that other trigger assembly in it. And then he dry fired it a couple times. For those of you who are enthusiasts, or gun enthusiasts, maybe you like to shoot guns, go shooting, or you own one, which I think every man needs a gun or a sword, one or the other. That's what the Bible says. I think that you know what dry fire means. So he held it up, he put a coin right there on the tip of it, and he squeezed the trigger. And then he had me do it. And that coin didn't move, and that trigger was so smooth. And then I knew, wow, this was all supposed to happen. This was all supposed to make me take my life easier, because that's the smoothest trigger I ever felt. And he said, okay, well, I got a membership at this gun range out in Alvin, and so what I'd like to do is let's go out there and put some rounds down range. That way you know that it works. I always like to dry fire my weapons before I use them. And I said, I got a lot going on, man. I got some big plans today. I got some things I need to do. He said, come on, just come to the range, dry fire it. You don't want to go to work. You don't want to pull a trigger and not know it's not going to work. Think about that. And I said, boy, you're right. You couldn't be any more right. So again, I let my guard down. And I say for some reason, but I know why, and you know why. So I let my guard down. I went to the range with him. We got to the range, and he set up a silhouette target. And that silhouette target was, I stood about 15 feet away from the silhouette target, and I took my gun, and I pointed it, my pistol, and I pulled the trigger. And I'm telling you, it was 15 yards. From 15 yards, it didn't hit the target. I'm talking a silhouette with a circle on it. It didn't hit the target. And so I was like, oh, that's weird. I was a little embarrassed. Haven't been in the military, haven't been in law enforcement so long. I know how to shoot a gun. I know all the good stuff about shooting a gun. I've done it. I could shoot. I was good. That's what I did. So I pointed the trigger again. I pulled the trigger. I pointed the gun, pulled the trigger again, and I missed the target again. Second time. Third time, pulled the trigger, missed the target. And at that point, I went from being embarrassed to being a little upset. So I looked at George and I said, listen, I want my trigger back. This is garbage. Let's go back. Let's put my trigger back in. You know, I appreciate you trying to help me, but this trigger isn't working. I've never missed a target that many times. And he says, well, let me take a look at it. So George took my firearm. He stood there. He pulled the trigger 3 times and put everything within about an inch circle on the target, right dead center. And George says, I don't know. I don't know if it's the gun. I think it's probably something you're doing. Can I coach you? And I told him, sure, you can coach me. Now, for those of you, again, those gun enthusiasts, if you know what coaching is when someone stands beside you or they lay beside you and you have a rifle and they're right next to you and they watch your trigger squeeze, they watch your breathing, they watch how you put your finger on the trigger, they watch everything, and then they give you advice while you're shooting. That's what coaching is in firearm training. So he was standing behind me. I pointed the gun. I shot it. It barely nicked the corner of the target. It was like high left. And he said, okay, well, try again. I pointed it. I shot it again. Again, I was high left. So I thought, okay, I'm high left. I probably need to come down center. But why am I using all this Kentucky windage, aiming high or low? I should be able to put my target right on it the way I've always been able to do and shoot the gun, and it hit the target. That's what I do. So I took my final shot, and I overcompensated and went high right. And man, I was frustrated. And it was at that moment I actually experienced a relationship with Christ through that man. Because while I was standing there, he took his left hand, he put it on my shoulder, and he said, listen, you can have the perfect stance. Sometimes you can have the perfect gun, the perfect trigger, the perfect ammo, the right distance from the target. You can have all that and not hit the target. He says sometimes you have to change something. And so what George did is he said, listen, I noticed when I met you that you've been a little disgruntled, you've been a little upset. I didn't tell you this, but I'd been in law enforcement one time, a long time ago, and I've seen it before, and man, you look like you look like you're struggling, and I just want to help you. He said, do you have a relationship with Christ? And I said, well, I was baptized as a baby. He said, no. Do you have a relationship with Christ? And of course my answer was no, because my idea of a relationship with Christ wasn't the same as his and the truth. So I was led to Christ on a gun range in Alvin, Texas. On a gun range in Alvin, Texas. I was led to Christ. And you know, the Bible says in Matthew, what I had read about a solid foundation, but it also says in Romans 9 or Romans 10 that, and I'm going to read out of Romans 10, 9 and 10. It says there, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it's with your mouth that you profess your faith and was saved. I was saved, man. How cool is that? Is that not a Texas story? I was brought to Jesus on a gun range in Alvin, Texas by a guy named George. I mean, that's a country song. You can't make that up. I thought, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I knew I had to get my life right, and he kind of coached me through some things. I started going back to that church, and slowly I would go up the driveway, and I would sit in the smoking area and smoke, and I was surrounded again by good Christian men. I couldn't wait to go there every weekend, not only because I was getting paid, but because, I felt something drawing me in. And so as I would sit there, I would slowly hear the speaker behind me, and that was the lead pastor of my church, teaching the message inside the church, and it was echoing outside. And slowly, I began comfortable enough to step into the lobby. Even in the summertime, I don't know if you've ever been around law enforcement, but if you ever get real close to a police officer in the summertime, like around June in Texas, he don't smell too good because he's got a vest on, and I don't care what you do, you can nuclear bomb that vest, it's still gonna stink. So I was a little embarrassed, but I went in there, and then I would go into this little cry room area. There was no one in it, and I would listen to the message, and I was there every service, every weekend, and it kept me coming back to the point where after I accepted Christ, I went home and I took all the plastic off. I took 2 notes I wrote. Remember the 2 notes I told you I wrote? I took the one off the door, obviously, when I got home, but I took the one on the nightstand, and I kept it. That was a note to my kids, and there was an apology. That was a note saying, hey, I'm sorry I messed it up, and I don't know what I did, I don't know how to fix it, and I'm sorry that I did this, but you're gonna be better for it because you won't have to worry about me anymore and I'll be gone. That was my mentality. That's what I wrote in that note to my children. I still carry that note in my vest today. That was 19 years ago. I still carry that same note in the pocket of my vest as a reminder. Still carry the same firearm with the same trigger assembly as a reminder. And listen, I want to tell you guys this. Just because you have a bad past doesn't mean you should be ashamed of it. You have to remember that bad past because, like I said, everyone has a story, and your story isn't done. All those things that you've been through is part of your testimony that's going to bring you to where you are today and beyond. That was important to me. So this brings me to my second point. Keep your head in the game. There is a Christian man trap. It's a man trap for Christians. You have to keep your head in the game. Just because you're saved, you're baptized, you go to church every weekend, you love Jesus and all that good stuff. Hey, listen, you're probably going to go to heaven. Because the Bible says, like I read in the book of Romans, if you profess and believe it, you're going to go to heaven. You probably will. But man, wouldn't you like to take a bunch of people with you? Keep your head in the game. As Christian men, we're going to come under attack. And let me tell you what those attacks are going to be. And I'll share my attack. My attack wasn't porn. It wasn't alcohol. It wasn't any of those other things. Not that I'm devaluing those things. If you got to struggle with that, that wasn't my struggle. My struggle was work and pride. Because when I accepted Christ, one day I just decided to leave law enforcement and go work for my church. I thought, man, I'm there. I made it. I walked away from law enforcement, and now I'm working for my church. I made it. And while I was there at the church, I was doing projects where I was out working in different areas all the time, in the evening times. On days everyone else was off, I was working because contractors and builders don't work church hours. I was working on $1 million projects, and I wasn't home. As a matter of fact, one day I was walking in the hallway, and my pastor pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Mark, can you do announcements this weekend?" And I said, "Pastor John, there's no way I can do that. Are you crazy?" He said, "Man, you're well-spoken. I need you to do that. It's really easy. Stand on the stage. Let's go practice. You just read off this paper. No one listens to you anyway." He said, and that's all I need you to do. And I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So we went and we practiced. I was walking back to my office, and I'll never forget this. My senior pastor walks by, and he goes, "Hey, I hear you're doing announcements this weekend." I said, "Yeah." He goes, Good. You'll do good. Just don't mess it up." And he took off walking. And to know our pastor, know his sense of humor, that's definitely something he would say. So I got into doing announcements, and I was doing them on a regular basis. I was doing them every weekend. We couldn't find anyone else to do them. Everyone else was too busy. As a matter of fact, I did announcements just about every weekend for a year. I wasn't home or with my wife. I was on the stage doing announcements. While I was doing announcements for that 1 year, my son, who is now a teenager, a senior in high school, I missed all of his basketball games. They had a losing season, but he had a stellar season. He had awards. He had personal awards from playing. They lost every single game, even the senior game. Remember we talked about athletics, that senior game? That senior game is when the seniors come out with the mom and she's carrying roses and whatever, she's crying, and dad comes out there proud, and they call your name. That's the senior, it's the last home game, senior game. It's the one you're supposed to win. That's where you play the weakest team ever. They lost that game. And on senior day, I wasn't there. I didn't walk out in the court with him because I had to do announcements, and I thought that was more important. My challenge, my trap as a Christian man was something different. My trap as a Christian man was a belief that I needed to be in a third world country, planting a mission, traveling 12, 15 times to Haiti to help plant a mission. It was awesome. I was able to work with people, and they're on the ground, do ministry for Jesus, and Haiti's horrible, but they need Jesus too. But I was there. And during that time that I was traveling back and forth to Haiti, my wife and I were going through fertility procedures so that we could have a baby. Because see, I got remarried. I met my wife at New Hope Church. She never had children. She wanted a child. And I wasn't there. During those important ovulation times, I wasn't there. I was in a third world country. Because I thought that's where God wanted me at that time. Now, maybe he did, I don't know. But I know one thing. I know that my first ministry, the first ministry that God gave me was my wife and my family. And somehow thinking that this whole work, or we'll just call it work, let's not even call it church. This whole work thing happened. I thought that was more important. I need to go, I need to accomplish these tasks, check it off, do it. And I lost focus on what was going on in the back. And that's a common thing. And if you're in this room right now, I'm sure that you've maybe you're doing that now. And if you are, let me tell you this: stop it. Your kids need you. I'm not saying quit your job, but I'm saying your wife needs you. Hey, check this out. You may be in the garden, you may have made it, but you're sleeping on Jesus. Don't sleep on Jesus. We have to be alert. We have to stay awake, and we have to remember we have a ministry that's more important than work. Now, there has to be a healthy balance. Again, I'm not saying quit your job. No one quit their job. But I'm saying that you better find that healthy balance, because if you don't, that house that you're building, that you built on a rock, that family that you built on a rock, it may not be on sand, but the storm's going to come and it's going to get damaged. Why not finish well? Why not finish well? So I was not home. I was too busy doing other things. I didn't have my head in the game. I was on the field, but my head wasn't in the game. And in doing that, I ran the risk of neglecting the first ministry that God gave me because I thought I was a Christian man. I got it figured out. I mean, I'm already a Christian. I've accepted Christ. I check off the boxes, go through the steps. I don't have to do that other stuff. I can tell you that one of the most important things you can do as a Christian man is find an accountability partner. You know, the Bible says that a cord of three strands is not easily broken. And what I relate that to, a cord of three strands, it's a common marriage verse. But to me, a cord of three strands in Ecclesiastes 4:12 means that you need to have someone strong with you in the Word and your relationship with Christ. That's how I believe that. Now, it can be related, like I said, to the marriage relationship. But a cord of three strands is not easily broken. As a matter of fact, if you drive down 45 in between here and we'll just say Dallas, you're going to find that there's wires in between the road. And there are wires, there's posts, and there's these wires that stretch all the way in between the two parts of the highway. 3 strands. Because an 18-wheeler moving at a high rate of speed can hit that and not go into oncoming traffic and kill people. It protects a cord of 3 strands. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. The Bible also says in Proverbs 27:12, the iron sharpens iron. You have to have someone sharpening you. You cannot be good for anyone unless you have someone who's sharpening you. Don't be dull. Keep your head in the game. And finally, the third point is fatherhood matters. You know, there's nothing that I can do to fix the stuff I did in the past. I can't go back and redo that. But my story isn't done. My relationship with my kids isn't done. My work isn't done. I'm in the boat and I'm rowing, I'm working, I'm fishing, because I know that I have a son who's going to grow up and be the man that I am. Do I want him to be the man that I am right now or the man that I was that built a house on sand? What do you want your son to be? Or your future son to be? Hey, let me ask you this. Are you the type of man that you want your daughter to bring home? What about the man you were 20 years ago? Is that the type of man you want your daughter to bring home? Not me. I got a little girl, and maybe they'll post a picture on the TV. But I have a daughter. Her name is Everly Louisa Davis. She's the sweetest thing. Actually, she's my little sinner. I'm not even gonna lie. That girl, she is 4, and I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40, and she is driving me crazy but keeping us young. But we're molding her in the direction because I know if I do my job, she's gonna find a man that loves Jesus, that's gonna treat her the way a Christian man's supposed to treat a woman and treat his family the same way. But she doesn't know what that looks like unless I model it. Do you wanna be the type of man that your daughter brings home? Fatherhood matters. Fatherhood matters. We talked about the statistics of kids walking away from church when they graduate from high school. Do you want that to be your kid? Do you want to go out and experience the world? You know, some Christians actually believe, you just got to go out there and make mistakes, and that's how God works. And then the prodigal son thing, you go out and do stupid stuff, then you come back. I don't think that was God's plan for us. God's plan for us was to go out and be fishers of men. And you can't be a fisher of men unless you have a pole and you know how to fish. Fatherhood matters. Your wife will follow you anywhere you go. Where do you want to take her? Fatherhood matters. As a matter of fact, what was the last thing you said to to any of your family members when you left the house this afternoon or this morning, or when the last time you walked out of the house was the last thing you said, because that's what you're going to be remembered for? What was that last interaction you had? Was it a hug? Was it a kiss? Or was it frustrated because the lawnmower's broke? Was it getting down on one knee and looking your daughter in the face and say, you are a jewel and God has big plans for you, baby. Jesus loves you. Are you telling your sons that? Are they watching you pray? Not at dinner. I mean, anyone can sit down at dinner and pray. I believe you can pray 24/7 no matter where you're at. Actually, I believe that protectors need to pray with their eyes open. But are you praying with your kids, your sons, your daughters? I mean, getting down on one knee and thanking God, praying for them and with them? Fatherhood matters. So the only takeaway today that I hope that you leave with, or These three things. Your story isn't done. Your story's not done. God's still working with you. Keep your head in the game. Because just because you made it, yeah, you made it, but that doesn't mean that you made it. That makes sense? You're there, but you're not there. Keep your head in the game. Don't sleep on Jesus. Keep your head in the game. And then finally, fatherhood matters. Listen, as men, we are being challenged every day. The minute we open our eyes and we walk, the first thing that we look at doesn't need to be Fox News, doesn't need to be the newspaper, it needs to be this thing right here. Because you got to prepare yourself for the world you're about ready to go into. That needs to be your first interaction. Because if this interaction isn't right, every interaction after that happens before this isn't right. That's important. Fatherhood matters. Keep your head in the game, and you got to fight the good fight. Because I'm telling you, eternity hangs in the balance. You know, there's another thing I didn't mention. When I left law enforcement, not only did I go work at a church and neglect spending time with my family, I also neglected the men that I used to work with, because I was known as a holy roller, the Bible thumper, but I was easy to get along with. Everyone liked hanging out with me. Heck, some people even came to me for advice. But I walked away from that. I stopped doing that because I was there. I made it. I'm too busy for that. I got other stuff going on. Plus, I can't hang out with those people. They're not, in my holy huddle. I might have an inappropriate picture taken or something and post it on Facebook and get me in trouble. Had all these reasons why, and I watched guys' marriage fall apart. I watched their marriages fall apart. I watched a suicide. I watched officers killed in the line of duty. I've seen grieving. From the outside, I watched all these things take place, and I felt like maybe I should have been there. But I was too busy. I didn't have my head in the game. So I'm gonna close with this. Fatherhood matters. You guys are awesome. I'm not sharing an awesome message about things that I do and get it right because I still mess up. I'm telling you how I've done it wrong and what I've learned about doing it right, and that it's not too late. And I will say this should go unsaid, but I will say it. If you're in this room right now because maybe someone pulled you, someone brought you here, or they asked you to come join or log on and watch this, and you don't have a relationship with Christ, get a hold of Pastor Dylan, get a hold of Dominic, get a hold of Pastor Weirland. Because Jesus died on the cross for you. He loves you, and it's not too late. Your story is not done. And what an amazing story that you're going to leave. Thank you again for allowing me to talk to y'all, and I just want you to know that you guys are important, and I love y'all. And as brothers and sisters in Christ, I know that we have a big job to do, and I know that Dominic's going to have my information. If you ever need to get a hold of me and talk about anything, shoot me a text message, email, whatever. I'm okay with that. And now don't send me an email and tell me about everything I said that was wrong. Save that for yourself. But fatherhood matters. I'm going to pray. Most heavenly gracious Father, thank you for this day, Father. I thank you for this opportunity to stand in front of men, your men that you created, Father, in your image, who are mad lovers and radical warriors. Father, I thank you for them and their hearts to be here, but their hearts to try to do it the right way. Father, I pray for their families. I pray for their jobs. I pray for their financial situation right now with this crisis, whatever this financial crisis is, Father, that you would just remind them that you're there, you're bigger than that, and it's going to be okay, and that's part of your story, Father. I just pray that you remind us of that, Father, and we know that this is a crazy world we live in, and there are evil people out there that want to do evil things, but Father, you have us as men in this room who are willing to stand up and do the right thing. Father, we love you. We're going to fight the good fight for you. We ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
What an incredible and very personal story Marc shared with us tonight. I really love the idea that our story isn't over. To know that no matter what life has been like up to this point, that God is still working, it's incredible. We're now going to transition into the discussion portion of our evening where you'll have a chance to share with the men what you felt most impactful during this time. Before we do that, though, I told you that I had something for you. I have a dare for you guys. I want to personally invite you to join me on a journey through what's called the 40-day love dare. Now, God has clearly called us all to be men of relationship, but how often do we blow that? with our wives, our fiancés, our girlfriends, our kids. We all want to be great for the people that we love, but I think you'll agree it's just easier said than done. Well, guys, this 40-day love dare, I believe, is a very powerful and effective way to take what we've learned tonight and put it into action. It's biblical, it's practical, and it'll make you a better man every day. Just one day at a time, over the next 40 days, the results will change your life and relationships forever. Now, each day of this journey, there's going to be 3 things happening. First, I'm going to discuss a unique aspect of love, either through video or text. Second, you'll be given a scripture and the dare for the day. Finally, you'll be given a platform to post your experiences, both good and bad. This is a journey that we will all take together. I'm going to participate too. Now, if you're going to join in, you do need to be part of our Faithbridge Men's Facebook and Instagram channels. So if you haven't done so yet, register for those now or sign up for those now. You can find them both by searching for the @Faithbridge Men, all one word. Guys, I'm really glad you're able to join us for tonight's Shop Talk. I really look forward to connecting with you all over the next 40 days as well. And I want you to enjoy your discussion time. God bless you all and go in peace.